Hey team, Mike here at After 40 Fitness and after40fitness.ca. Going to tackle phase 2 today, or part 2 of the discussion about artificial sweeteners. Do they break a fast? Are they keto friendly, fasting friendly, or not? If this is your first time to my channel or you haven't yet, please do hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell icon and all for notifications. Putting out 2 or 3 videos a week right now in the keto, low carb, Atkins, and intermittent fasting space. That's where I live, right along with you. And you're going to want to get notified when I get a brainchild or something prompts, a question. By the way, the best questions, put a question in a comment down below a video of something you'd like to get more information on or get my take on. I'll definitely give you the most scientific approach, evidence-based approach I know how. And you can do with that information what you will. But do that. Please do hit subscribe. And when I get a brainchild, you'll get notified. On that note, phase 1 or part 1 of this little series was on aspartame. If you haven't watched that yet, you can, right after this video, please go back and watch that. I present 9 studies, 9 in a row, that show that aspartame, on top of being 0 carbs, 0 calories, which makes it keto friendly, also has 0 cephalic insulin response, meaning it's perfectly good for fasting. If you are a faster, an intermittent faster, or extended faster, and you decide you want to go for a Diet Coke or a Coke Zero or a Diet Pepsi during the day, a Diet Root Beer is my preference, then by all means you can. It qualifies in every way, shape, or form as part of a clean fast. In my humble opinion, I vote enjoy. Oh my goodness. However, one of the big reasons behind this series is in the intermittent fasting groups, there's a woman named Jen Stevens, a teacher who has done now a couple of books on fasting, and she rails against artificial sweeteners. She is totally of the opinion that they break a fast, and the dogma and rhetoric based on her opinion and her interpretation of a couple of studies that, in my humble opinion, she misrepresents. Well, we're going to deal with that today. That is part 2. Well, let's just get after it. Let's look at book number 1 and let's see what she has to say. Just a reminder that I'm looking at a screen over here where I've got Jen's book, but my camera's in front of me, so don't be surprised if in between texts I look over to the left. Okay, bear with me. All right, so chapter 10 of Delay, Don't Deny is the title, Keeping the Fast, What Can I Have When Fasting? And I want you to look at this from an objective kind of, if I didn't have Jen's explanation, what would I get from the study? All right, so let's not try to have a preconceived idea. Let's not assume that we have a confirmation bias. If you recall, a confirmation bias is looking for data, looking for studies, looking for scientific evidence that supports our preconceived ideas. Let's not do that. Let's look at the study on its merits, and you and I will glean what we get from it. Let's do that, all right? So, back to the text. What can I have when I'm fasting? So I'm going to jump down very quickly to burn, baby burn. What causes insulin to spike? So Jen's whole premise, right, isn't calories or food, it's insulin. She follows the insulin barometer methodology of whatever spikes insulin breaks a fast. What causes insulin to spike? Well, foods do, but we already know we shouldn't be eating if we're fasting. The really sneaky thing you need to understand is that even 0-calorie beverages and diet products can cause your insulin to spike. Well, if you saw my last video, which I'll link to below on aspartame, we know that doesn't happen. Aspartame does not ever, in any study ever, and I proved it with 9 studies, doesn't cause your insulin to spike. But anyway, you could still be ingesting 0 calories during your fasting period and be spiking your insulin constantly. Just to recap for emphasis, by spiking your insulin during the day, you will not access your stored fat effectively, right? I want you to notice some of the nebulous terms that she uses. Effectively, so does that mean you still are? Right? So instead of being at 100% fat utilization, you have a Diet Coke, and well, again, Diet Coke's a bad example because aspartame has no impact, but you have a sugar-free monster that has sucralose, and your ability to access stored fat drops from 100% to 85. Do you care? I don't. You might, but that's a personal choice. And you risk slowing your metabolism. I don't know what that, that's a nebulous term. So can having a sugar-free monster slow your metabolism? Not in any science ever. We'll have a look at that. When you understand that, you realize that the last thing you would ever want to do is spike your insulin by ingesting the wrong thing during a fast. 100% correct. 100%. I agree with that comment, by the way, just so you know, you don't want to spike insulin during a fast. So the premise then is going to be, does whatever she say next spike insulin? Does the science support that? Let's have a look. Back to it again. When we taste something sweet, our bodies know that calories are entering the body and insulin is released to deal with the expected rise in blood sugar. The only problem is in the modern era, we figured out how to make things that taste sweet and don't actually have calories. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So We think we're making a good choice because we know that it's calories that make us gain weight, correct? Anything with 0 calories seems perfect for the dieter. It is, except the opposite is true. You're sabotaging your success and you don't even know it. Whoa, another nebulous term. What does that mean, sabotaging? I know what it means definition-wise. Okay, what do you think it means? Well, let's see how she defines it. If you search for information on various sweeteners and insulin release, you'll find all sorts of contradictory information. Correct. 100%, because you're not looking at science. If you look for information, you're going to read papers and articles and blogs and vlogs. You'll read something like this, a book written by a teacher, and you're going to go, oh my, I mean, just jump into any intermittent fasting forum right now for women. Any intermittent fasting. I look over my wife's shoulder when she's in the forums, and every day she's like, oh my God, Jin's at it again, or so-and-so's quoting Jin, a teacher. She's not a scientist. We're going to get to some of the studies she uses. Many websites and studies in brackets. Websites, yes. Studies, we're going to see. That's what I focus on, being science-minded, if you will, trying to employ the scientific method, right? Let's see what she says. Seem to suggest that certain sweeteners are safe, correct. Other websites or studies say the opposite. Not the case. It can be really hard to know who is right. Here's a link that might help. It takes you to the abstract of a study about sweet taste in insulin. Insulin release is referred to as CPIR. Let's go have a look at that. So actually, let's read. I'm going to let you do this. Let's do this. Let's read her synopsis, her interpretation, and then we'll go look at the study itself. This is what they found. We conclude from the results that sweetness information conducted by this taste nerve provides essential information for eliciting CPIR. So no mention of what the sweet flavor was, no mention of what the sweetener was, just that whatever it was, conducted by this nerve, provides essential information for eliciting CPIR. I'm good with that. She says, pay attention. They found that sweetness, well, hold on a second. Cause CPIR? That's not what they just said above. Her text, her comment is they found that sweetness caused. That sounds pretty definitive. What they say here is that from the results, we conclude that sweetness information provides essential information for eliciting. I didn't read cause, just that there was essential information from this nerve that could. Even before blood glucose went up, insulin had already been released just from sweet taste. Here's something else from the study that was quite interesting. When they cut the nerve, this is in rats, they had no insulin response. So there's clearly no doubt. Whatever sweetener they used, when it hit the palate, when it hit the taste buds, when it hit the tongue, right, there was a cephalic response. So we're going to go and have a look at what that study says. Let me look up the study. I'll be right back. Okay, here's the study. This is from PubMed, but you'll notice it's in the journal Biomedical Research. The title is Relationship Between Insulin Release and Taste. Hey, the title sounds good. I like it. Let's go ahead and have a look at the synopsis of the study. Here you go. We used female Worcester rats. Okay. All right. You know where I'm going to go with this already. What's this got to do with humans? Right? If Jin is basing the entire premise and all the dogma and rhetoric in the forums was based on a study on rats, I'm done. Let's proceed. I'll work with you on this one. All right. 5 basic taste stimuli: sugar, sodium chloride, HCI, quinine, and monosodium glutamate. Interesting, right? So the 5 flavors, without reading ahead, how many do you think elicited a CPIR response, an insulinic response? Rats reliably exhibited CPIR to sucrose. Sucrose, make no mistake, not sucralose. Sucrose is table sugar. Sucrose is sugar. Right? In this response, it was to the sugar. Notice sodium chloride, HCI, quinine, and monosodium glutamate did not elicit CPIR. How come Jin left that out? How come she didn't mention in her excerpt in the book that 1 out of 5 flavors, and the only one, by the way, that did, has calories? Nonetheless, I just wanted you to get that of the 5 flavors, only sucrose had an impact. Cool, right? Let's move on back to the book. Okay, so that's study number 1 done. Let's go on. She does mention another study. Here's another study related to insulin release and sweet taste. I hope this one's better. This is also PubMed good. In the second study, participants didn't ingest the sweetened liquid fully. They swished it around and spit it out. Perfect. That is a true test of CPIR. Good. And I'm hoping this is human. From the abstract, a significant increase of plasma insulin concentration was apparent after stimulation with sugar, right, sucrose, and saccharin. Well, if you watched my last video, you know that's accepted. That's understood. Saccharin has an insulin response. It is a non-cal sweetener. Thankfully, saccharin isn't used anymore. Thankfully, saccharin isn't commercially available in any beverage. Saccharin is only available in those little pink sweet and low packets that in the last video Rhonda referred to. as causing her to have hunger. So God bless. I can't argue that because, again, I don't have a confirmation bias. The science does say that saccharin has an insulinic response from taste. However, I can already tell it has nothing to do with what you and I drink. It has nothing to do with stevia or erythritol or monk or aspartame or sucralose. I don't even know what we're going to talk about. However, in conclusion, the current data suggests that the sweeteners, I don't know why sucrose is mentioned. That's sugar. So when I think of sweeteners, I don't know about you, but I think of aspartame and sucralose and stevia and monk and erythritol. I don't think of sugar. Interesting. The sweeteners sucrose and saccharin activate a CPIR even when applied to the oral cavity only. Let's read it. Let's go ahead and read it and see how it compares to the actual study. The subjects in the experiment swished around sweet liquids and spit them out. The insulin was raised in response to the sweet taste. Note, some people get nervous at this point and start to worry about brushing their teeth and using mouthwash. Think about it this way. Yes, you may have a sweet taste in your mouth briefly from brushing your teeth or using mouthwash, but the duration isn't going to be for long. Well, that doesn't matter. I don't know that duration matters. Everyone who knows you has asked me to tell you, please don't stop brushing your teeth. Well, I agree. So what's the takeaway from these two studies? When you read somewhere on the internet that aspartame, oh my God, watch this bold-faced lie. That aspartame doesn't cause insulin release, or stevia doesn't cause insulin release, or blank does not cause insulin release, etc. Remember these studies. A sweet taste equals insulin release even in the absence of calories. Oh, okay, well, let's go have a look at this study and see if aspartame or stevia were even mentioned. This should be interesting. Let's go. All right, this study number 2 is excellent. Cephalic phase insulin release in healthy humans, thank God. Yeah, after taste stimulation reported on in the journal Appetite. From the abstract, let's cut to the chase. Under fasting conditions, healthy humans sipped and washed their mouths out with 8 solutions. Sucrose, sugar, right? Saccharin, acetic acid, sodium chloride, quinine, distilled water, starch, and sodium glutamate, 45 seconds. I wish it wasn't 45 seconds. That's too long. That's not natural. But anyway, 45 seconds and spit it out. Blood collection was done both 3 minutes before the test to get a baseline, then 3, 5, 7, and 10 minutes after. What was the impact? A significant increase in plasma insulin concentration was apparent after stimulation with sugar and saccharin. Hey, we've already established that. We've already established from the previous study that sugar and saccharin have a response. Sugar does because it has calories. Saccharin does even though it doesn't have calories. In conclusion, the current data suggests that the sweetener sucrose and saccharin activate CPIR when applied to the oral cavity out of 8. I wonder why in the book she didn't say that 2 out of 8 flavors, 25%. I commented on this in the last video as well on aspartame. It was one of the studies that we referred to, and it didn't count in the 9 studies that were against an insulin response from aspartame. But did you notice? In the book, she commented on aspartame and stevia and blank as not having an insulin response. Well, this study doesn't prove that any of those do. I mean, what a leap. If you use either of these studies to say there's an issue with aspartame or sucralose or stevia or monk or erythritol, shame on you. That's all I can say is shame on you based on this information. All right, so that's it for book number 1. Those are the only 2 studies that were commented on. So let's move on now to book number 2. Jean gets into the cephalic response on page 54, so I'm going to cut right to the taste. And here's where she introduces it. Remember, the concept is that sweetness and food-like flavors both send the signal to your brain that food is on its way, and insulin is needed pronto. The very taste of sweetness or food-like flavors, even if you don't actually swallow anything, initiates the cephalic phase insulin response, or release, or CPIR, which is something we want to avoid while fasting. Great little summary. Agree 100%. No issue there. Let's go on and see how she explains it this time. And I've highlighted the key parts, but you can go ahead and get this book downloaded. I'm actually looking at it right now on Kindle Cloud through read.amazon.ca, so you can do the same. Let's learn how the science. Oh, that sounds tricky. Let's learn the science of how CPIR works. Within 2 minutes of tasting sweetness, the body releases insulin. The amount of insulin peaks at 4 minutes and returns to baseline levels within 8 to 10. Absolutely true. Every study on CPIR shows this. She explains this is why it's okay to brush your teeth during a fast, by the way. Even though your toothpaste may have sweetness, insulin goes back down pretty quickly after a brief encounter. So she then says it's not okay to drink beverage or chew sweetened gum because you don't just do that. You're not done in... How long do you brush your teeth for, if I asked? For me, it's like 2 minutes. So for about 2 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and initiate this, according to Jin, this cephalic response, but that's okay. She says that's okay. I'm okay to spike my insulin for about, 10 minutes? We established it was already about 10 minutes. And the reason for that is she says is okay because you got to brush your teeth. It's not okay to drink a sweetened beverage or chew sweetened gum because you don't just do that. No, you drink that sweetened cup of coffee or diet soda over a long period. All right, so what's the takeaway? You can go ahead and have a Diet Coke according to Gin, or a sugar-free Monster, or something with stevia, or erythritol or monk, even though science doesn't support any of those as being problematic, as long as you do it quickly. All right, so as long as I chug down my sugar-free, according to Gin, this is her words. If you follow Gin, if you believe her rhetoric, then you are okay to have a sugar-free Monster. I don't ever want to hear any of you ever again in social media say, no, you can't have a sugar-free Monster, right? Because Gin said you can as long as you drink it in 2 minutes or less. Now, I don't know about you, I can do that. I can put back a sugar-free Monster in about 2 minutes and keep right on trucking, get a nice little guarana and a caffeine little buzz, and keep right on trucking. Gin said so. Okay, keep on trucking. The one that convinced me, she's going to get into the studies now. Remember, science. There are numerous studies that illustrate the relationship. Yes, there are studies that illustrate the relationship between tasting sweetness and CPIR. I'm good with that. The one that convinced me was a 2008 human study that showed a significant increase of plasma insulin concentration when participants swished sweetened solution around their mouth. In this study, they tested sucrose and saccharin. She's referring back to that same study we just looked at, so let's disregard that one. In a 2017 study, this one's good. In a 2017 study, scientists found that subjects who were overweight had a significant, like how she emphasized that. Remember, when it comes to studies, significance doesn't mean a spike. It just means it was recognizable and detectable and repeatable. We'll talk about this in just a second. Significant CPIR in response, but by the way, she's misusing it there. She's highlighting it to make you think in terms of spike. Right? I don't like that. That's nebulous. That's sneaky. Right? That's playing with the emotions of words. In response to the taste of sucralose. This one's good. We'll look at this one. I'm going to just finish off the summary of all three studies. In 1993, scientists examined the difference in insulin response between subjects of normal weight, right? Insulin response, by the way, we'll talk about this in a second, weight, and those who were obese, so normal weight and obese. They found that the obese subjects had elevated fasting insulin levels, meaning that they started with higher baseline levels, had even greater CPR than the normal weight subjects. Now, you're going to be asking yourself right now, what did they use for sweeteners? Keep that in the back of your mind. What did they use for sweeteners in this 1993 test? And then lastly, one more comment. Here's one more study that may be more convincing for the skeptics out there. We already talked about this one too. In a 2007 rat study, scientists measured their insulin response to sweet tastes. All right, so that's the one we looked at. I don't know how this is even more convincing for skeptics. Okay, it's in rats, and as if you recall, they looked at 5 flavors, and only 2, sucrose and saccharin, had a response. I'm not convinced of anything based on that. Not aspartame, not sucralose. Definitely not monk, stevia, or erythritol. None of those show a CPIR, right? Even in the face of evidence I just shared, it may surprise you to know that the sweet taste and insulin release debate remains one of the biggest sticking points for many people, and there are those out there who ridicule the concept completely. I am not one of those. Okay, so I like how she worded it. It's very nebulous again. They ridicule the concept completely. I don't. It is absolutely proven, 100% proven in saccharin. Let's go have a look at the studies she does refer to. All right, so from Jin's book, there are 2 studies we're going to look up. The higher one in 2017 is in regard to sucralose, but the lower one is a much quicker one. I'll just deal with it quickly and get on to that good one in 2017. This one from 2009. Here's the article itself. It's in the journal Metabolism. The study was titled The Cephalic Phase Insulin in Obese and Normal Weight Men, Relation to Postprandial Insulin. Where I'm going to go with that real quick is how irrelevant this is. We're not talking about fasting then. Prandial, if you haven't heard that word, prandial means a meal. So postprandial, this is going to compare the insulin response to a sweetener, but in response to a meal. So they're going to give 2 groups of men, obese and normal weight men, they're going to give them a calorie-dense meal. One's going to have a sweetener, one won't, and they're going to check and see what the difference was in insulin postprandial. All right, bear with me. It's irrelevant to what we're talking about since the whole premise of Jin's books are to fast, intermittent fasting. This one, again, being called feast, fast, repeat. All right, so why she would quote a study that has to do ending along the lines of with food is irrelevant. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and have a look at it real quick. I just went ahead and highlighted from the abstract when insulin data were expressed as absolute differences from baseline values, obese subjects exhibited significantly greater CPIR than normal weight subjects. And you would think for a second that makes sense. They're insulin resistant. So they're going to have a greater response to anything, and they do. In every study in insulin-resistant men who are obese, or women for that matter, make no mistake, you're not excluded, obviously, then the insulin response is greater for those that are obese with IR versus those that are lean. That's got to make sense. Obese subjects were then separated into groups depending on their fasting insulin levels. So remember this is still fed, but depending on when they were fasting, what their insulin levels were like. So you could say that they broke up these groups based on how bad their IR was, how bad their insulin resistant was. And notice this showed that only those subjects with elevated fasting, right, with IR, with elevated fasting insulin levels exhibited greater CPIR than normal. Well, hello, we know that, and suggested that previous reports of exaggerated CPIR in the obese are merely a reflection of that basal fasting insulin level. We're not learning anything from this study. However, when insulin values were expressed as percentages of baseline, no significant differences between normal weight and obese subjects were found. There's a trend. A trend means insignificant. Right? You look up the word trend in a study, it'll mean insignificant. It was less than the p-value of 0.05. It was not repeatable. It was not said with confidence. So, what did we learn from this? As a percentage, yes, in true value, the insulin went up. If your insulin, here, I'll make it simple for you. My fasting insulin is right around 4.1. If I go up by 10%, guess what? I go to 4.5. Someone whose fasting insulin is 11 because they have strong IR, their insulin goes up by 10%. It goes up by not just 0.4 like mine, it goes up by greater than 1% to greater than 12. In true values, it looks like they went up by more than double. In percentages, we were exactly the same at 10%. All right, so this study's garbage, and frankly, shame on Jin for using it, but I'll move on then to the more important study of 2017. Okay, I know we're over 20 minutes, but please bear with me. This is the most important study of them all. This study is called the Cephalic Phase Insulin Response to Nutritive and Low-Calorie Sweeteners, so nutritive being calories, right? So sugar, and low-cal sweeteners, in this case, it's sucralose, in solid and beverage form. It was reported on in the Journal of Physiological Behavior. The reason why it's relevant is up until this study, no study had yet shown any response to sucralose. 64, good study size, overweight and obese. And it did say in the abstract that was conducted exclusively in individuals overweight or obese who were neither restrained eaters, so no diet regimen whatsoever, not in a calorie deficit, but may have been insulin resistant. And they said may have because I think when I looked at the study, all but 2 were, so they couldn't use the word were. They had to say may have been. Generally speaking, though, overweight, obese, you wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. The participants were given a randomly assigned blinded test load of either sucrose or sucralose in either beverage or solid form, swished around for 15 seconds, and then expectorated meant spit out. So I want to show you, this is so good. This study actually is very good at showing responders versus non-responders. And so don't let anybody tell you that the cephalic insulin response is universal, that it happens to everybody. Not the case. Remember, this is a very compromised section of the U.S. population. This is a group of people who are overweight, obese, followers of a SAD, and if they have insulin resistance, call them pre-diabetic. Okay? This has nothing to do with you and me. If you are at all a healthy eater, if you're in Atkins, low-carb, or keto, if you're an intermittent faster, this study is irrelevant. They didn't use a single person like you or I. And yet, wait till you see the results of this study. I'm just going to draw your attention over to the low-cal beverage. All the numbers here, you can do the same thing as you look at this. Take a screenshot of this if you will. But I want you to notice in the very right column under low-cal beverage, N equals 64. So all 64 did all 4 tests. Isn't that interesting? This is a good study. Now, notice responders. Those that responded who had a cephalic insulin response of the 64 to the low-cal beverage, call it sugar-free monster since that uses sucralose. That may very well have been a sugar-free monster or a sugar-free rockstar. 25% were responders. 25% saw their insulin go up. Non-responders were 39. Roughly a 60-40 split. Still, 60% didn't have a response. This is why Dr. Fung calls this cephalic insulin response a environmentally learned response. You teach yourself, if you're an obese, sad follower, and every time something sweet touches your tongue, and it's calories, over time you teach your body that when you do taste something sweet, body, you can expect calories. Okay, well, that's not the case. And clearly it's not the case for 60% of people who still followed the same diet and had insulin resistance. Okay, so very much a minority of the population of sad followers have this happen to sucralose. Right? Not you and I. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Guess what they did? Because they then took them and gave them 2 weeks of training. 2 weeks of, this is what the cephalic phase insulin response is. When you taste something sweet, guess what happens? You're secreting a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of insulin. And it's very transient. It's gone in 10 minutes, as we approved, and Jen agreed. Okay? It's a little bit, it's gone quickly, but you're having it happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you sugar-free gum. We're going to see in the course of 2 weeks if we can re-educate you not to have that cephalic insulin response. Okay, so let me just show you how that happened in this study. During phase 2, participants underwent a 2-week training period to facilitate associative learning between the sensory and nutritive properties of test loads and their post-ingestive effects. And there was no CPIR after training in responders. Oh my God, let that sink in. How come Jen doesn't talk about that? She quoted the study, but she omitted this piece. She omitted that 60% didn't have it. She made it sound like it's matter of fact. Anything sweet touches your palate, you get an insulin response. How misleading is that? And she wrote 2 books. I got to write a book. Why not? Because if she can spout bullshit like that, I can at least spout the truth. Okay, 60% didn't have it. Only 40% of SAD followers. And in this case, there was no CPIR. Even for the 40% who had a response, guess what? After training for 2 weeks, no more. No more CPIR. How's that for a takeaway? If you want a takeaway from this video, boom, there it is. Once you're ketotic in ketosis, an Atkins-ite, a low-carber, or even an intermittent faster, you lose this. You lose this ability. It's gone. You can go ahead and have sweet things. Your body is not what they proved in 2 weeks of training is your body is pretty damn smart. And if you start to taste things that are sweet and you don't provide calories, guess what the body's going to do? It's going to figure it out. It's going to learn. It's going to realize, oh my God, I can no longer associate sweet tastes with calories. Therefore, pancreas, stop throwing out that little bit of insulin. So the conclusion, listen, this is from the authors of the study. Jen left this out. The audacity. Jen, man, I hope this video gets in front of you. You got nerve. Okay, we cannot characterize the sucralose effect on the CPIR as robust. Jen does. She calls it robust. She makes it sound like it's matter of fact. It's going to happen 100% of the time. Right? And she even talks about things that are never proven. Never mind sucralose that had a 40%. Oh man, you can tell I'm fired up. Jen, you suck. Okay? On CPIR is robust based on our observations in this trial. It was observed only in a subset of study individuals and was not study participants and was not reliably reproduced. Like, I'm done. If you believe after you take the time to watch this video, if I ever, I'll never know, but if you actually jump into a social media forum or you have a conversation and you talk about the cephalic insulin response to sweet taste, I got nothing. You have audacity. That's all I can say. You're as bad as Jen. Yep, that's it. I've had enough. So, hey, like the video, subscribe to the video, share the video, do what you want with the video. Do please put a comment down below if you agree, disagree, if you found me mildly entertaining, or if you thought I was right out to lunch. Put that down below. Give me something concrete, though. Don't just put a comment. If you're going to come back at me, you better come with science. Right? Makes sense? On that note, don't forget to hit that like button because I deserve it. After this 30 minutes, if you stuck through it, you deserve it. But man, I put my heart and soul into this one. So don't forget to subscribe and do feel free. Anytime someone says you can't have a Diet Coke, sugar-free Monster, or sweet taste, you can't have some sucralose or aspartame in your coffee or tea, tell them to go right to hell and post this video. Okay, on that note, see you in the next one.